Good afternoon and welcome to today's Lunch with NAIOP webinar. Before we begin today, our NAIOP Vancouver President, Jason Kiselbach, will say a few words.
Okay, perfect. Welcome everyone to a special installment of our Lunch with NAIOP series. Today we've set aside some extra time so that you can benefit from the insights and experience of our special guests and take part in some Q&A at the end of the talk. Before I make the introductions, I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsors whose names and logos are being presented now. Local sponsorship is the lifeblood of our chapter, and we could not provide the advocacy, networking, and educational opportunities that we do year after year without the generous support and dedication of our sponsor companies. So a big thank you to all our sponsors today. As always, we are very grateful for your support. And now it's my pleasure to introduce you to our guests for today. Tom Bisacquino is the President and CEO of NAIOP. He's responsible for overseeing the strategic direction of the association and directs NAIOP's legislative activities on behalf of its membership at all levels of government. Under Tom's guidance, the NAIOP headquarters staff is responsible for serving more than 20,000 members who are developers, investors, and owners of commercial real estate across North America. Tom, we're glad you could be with us today.
Thank you, Jason. I appreciate the opportunity to address the members and looking forward to a lively conversation.
And next, I'd like to introduce Larry Lance, the 2020 chairman of NAIOP. Larry is the executive vice president and a member of the investment committee at EverWest Real Estate Investors, where he directs overall asset services. Larry is a 33-year NAIOP member, a research foundation governor, and serves on the Industry Trends Task Force. And I know Larry has a particular connection to Canada and Vancouver that he will share with us shortly. Larry, thank you for being with us.
You're welcome. Thank you. Happy to be part of this today. Thank you.
So I'll jump right into the Q&A part of the session today. Maybe we can start with Tom. You've been with NAIOP for almost 30 years. Can you walk us through your career history and your current role with the organization?
Certainly. Been with the organization a long time. Been through a bunch of cycles, real estate cycles, starting with the early 90s, late 90s, 2000s. But honestly, we've never seen anything like we're facing today. My role with the organization in 1991, I was made the president and CEO of the organization. So I guide the headquarters staff here in Washington. I'm also a registered federal lobbyist, so I work with our team up on Capitol Hill. But really, this organization's strength and backbone of the chapters, such as yourself and all the chapter volunteers and all the various paid staff at the local level that keep this organization going. When I was, joining the organization, we had about 7,000 members. And by the early 90s, when we had the old non-performing loan crisis, we dropped to about 3,800. Last year was our high watermark where we topped over 20,000 members. And if I remember correctly, the 20,000th member came from Vancouver, and we celebrated that. So it was a great testimony that our 20,000th member came from your backyard, Jason. So that's a quick snapshot of kind of what I do, and we'll certainly get into more, but I'll turn the ball over to Larry.
Sure, yeah, same question, Larry. If you could just give us a brief overview of your career to date and maybe your mission for the organization.
Okay, yeah, thank you. First of all, delighted to be participating in this, and thank you all for being NAIOP members and participating. And I understand you're doing these weekly, which is really impressive that a chapter is that active and engaging and collaborating. So, but it's kind of hard for me to believe, but this is my 40th year in the industry, NAIOP member for 33 years. I've told some other chapters as we go through these that this is, given that 40-year experience, it's all been in commercial real estate and development, mainly office buildings, but we also do warehouses and multifamily. But I've been through 5 of these downturns in over the 40-year period. This is my 5th one. It feels like, while this is severe, I have a little experience. I'm a little more calm around my behavior that I would have been maybe going back several decades ago in my early experience in going through downturns. But my current role is EVP of asset services and development. And my most of my activities focus is on development here as a company. You alluded to it, Jason, but 2 years ago, we sold our U.S. platform, EverWest Real Estate Investors, to Great West Real Estate Realty Advisors. So we're owned by a Canadian firm that you all know. And in fact, a shout out to Antheo. I know he's going to be your upcoming president if he's on. Hello, Ewan. And Don Harrison's one of the members too. Don and I originally met at a NAIOP, and was the beginning of us striking a deal for the expansion of Great West Realty Advisors into the U.S. So Don and I are good friends, and we work very well together and speak quite often. The combined entities, including the European operation of Great West Life and Canadian and U.S., is about 27 billion in assets under management. So I find myself part of a very significant worldwide real estate organization and money management firm, and we couldn't be more delighted to have my parent company be Canadians. And I have my Canadian flag in the background there because the Canadian chapters were generous enough to have dinner with me when I was in Washington, and I think it was the legislative retreat. And they gave me a flag. I prominently displayed it in my office. It didn't just go up today. This has been displayed since I came back in February. So goals, though, for me as chairman, as you all know, this is a volunteer job. It's a 1 year commitment. And given my age and experience into the industry, really what I am trying to achieve this year, wanted to try to achieve face-to-face. In fact, I think I was scheduled to be in Vancouver last week, if I recall. But yeah, we've been having to cancel these and just do them virtually. And thank God for the technology that we have today. We couldn't have done this a few years ago. But my goals for the NAIOP and my leadership this year is really to reach out to senior, experienced professionals like myself in the industry this year, and really encourage the more experienced senior people to give back to the organization and give back to the membership before you retire. And I got a few more years and really love the business, but I really want to give back and encourage the senior leadership to mentor and try to encourage the development of our younger professionals. And so mentorship, I'm really trying to push with the DLs this year. We've done several DL webinars, and I've mentored DLs here in Denver, and I'm just trying to encourage everybody to do that. Legislatively, of course, in the U.S., it's really a big part of kind of the platform, and then education. And to try to be relevant in the industry with our educational programs and content. Tom's going to speak to that more, but that's sort of my message for the groups is mentorship, developing the younger leaders. I think we've gotten 30% plus of our membership now are DLs, I believe, Tom, and that's where the growth is. You all that are in that DL category, I would just tell you, I mean, a sincere comment, you're the future of this organization. And we want to do everything we can to make this a very strong value proposition in your membership. So
appreciate that background and that you're flying the flag literally for us. And it's a great example of how deal making can happen through NAIOP that the Great West Life deal initiated through membership. So we wanted to do kind of two parts to the Q&A. The first on more of the market dynamics, macro perspective with Larry, and then we'll touch more on the NAIOP corporate update with Tom after that. So Larry, your video's off. Are you still with us?
I am. Pardon me. Hold on. I just discovered I had a 10% battery life that kicked in. So I'll have to try to plug this in.
All right, let us know if things get critical.
Okay. All right.
So just wanted to start kind of at the macro level with how things are playing out in the major markets for commercial real estate from your perspective, especially over the past 12 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, we all know it. We're all living through it. This is really unprecedented times, and a lot of uncertainty with the coronavirus. But the health in the economy has been swift and dramatic in terms of, basically we've been on now, shelter for 3 months. Most of us, I'm in my office now, we're working 50% capacity by city and state mandate here in Colorado, but most of us have been working from home. I think, Tom, you're still at home. DC's not open yet. But it's had, a material economic impact, in North America, around the world. And so fortunately, our Federal Reserve, and I think yours the same, has, done everything they can to try to provide stimulus. We cut borrowing costs to zero. We've injected trillions of dollars into the economy, into these dislocated capital markets. And our Fed chief has basically said, we are going to provide liquidity. These markets are not going to freeze up. We're going to do everything possible to make sure that they don't freeze up. And he's really walking the walk and talking the talk. But coming out of this, and again, I mentioned earlier, I've been through 5 of these. This one's different. I think this shock, I believe, and I think it's a sentiment shared by others, is going to be probably shorter in duration in terms of recovery. And so we're likely to see positive growth in the latter part of this year and going into 2021, and probably back to pretty strong growth, we believe, in 21 through 24. So there was very positive demand metrics in the U.S. I can't speak for Vancouver, but I know in most of the major markets in the U.S., unlike the 2008-2009 recession that we went through, there really wasn't the sense of over leveraging and overbuilding. So the supply demand metrics in the U.S. have been pretty well in check and very healthy. So not an overbuilding situation, not an over leveraged situation. Our banks back in 2007 had, in combined, I think 400 billion of capital. Today they have 1.7 trillion of capital backing their balance sheet. So this is not a financial crisis in the sense of what it was back in 2007 and 8. But investors, we expect, will continually to allocate into real estate. And I think actually the allocations will increase over the next 2 to 3 years. Bond yields are going to remain low. In terms of property sectors, and I think we all read this and we see it, but the shop from home e-commerce business is just, it was already had a lot of momentum, but this supercharged it. So our experience has been, and I would guess that you would share it up there, is the industrial sector is really being maintained. And I think we're going to wake up and see that industrial was maybe a small blip, but it's. I had a call yesterday with one of my acquisition guys. We're trying to buy a property in New Jersey, and he said, Larry, it's, we missed the opportunity. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, Brookfield and Blackstone have outbid us. Right. And they're right back to the pricing that they would have been 3 months ago. So that's the industrial sector. The office sector is a little more unknowns. I do think the office sector will come back, and NAIOP and others are trying to. And in fact, Wendy Waters in our Vancouver office of Great West Realty is our head of research, and we're gonna try to put together some studies. And there's been other studies done already on the office sector. What's the impact? Do people really want to come back to the offices? And my bias is going to be, I think people do want to come back to offices. I think this is a social business. People in general want to be social. We're not going to be captive. And frankly, my message to the developing leaders is, if you're going to develop your careers, you're not going to do it behind a Zoom call in your home, right? So eventually office is going to come back. And I think, retail, tough sector. Hotel, very tough sector. Office buildings, we think, it's going to come back to a normalization that we've seen in the past. However, it may be, 6, 8, 10, 12, 18 months on office. And I think people are going to settle down but creative office, creative uses of office, maybe platooning in the office. Our density right now is 50% mandated. And, we may be to the point where we're 80% in 4 or 5 months. And the densities may increase or rather decrease, and we'll have less densities going forward in office. So on a capital markets point of view, we've all lived through this now. We've seen it. The headlines are bleak. Transaction volume is down 70%. And I'm looking at I don't know if you'll read the Real Capital Analytics reports, but in April, just as office down 60%, retail down 84%, hotels down 98%, senior living care down 83%, but overall average 71% decline. I think it's going to come back in the next few months. We're actually seeing the markets open up a little bit. We're financing a new industrial development project here in Denver, and we just got a quote from a bank to finance a spec industrial building at 60%. And 3 weeks ago, I figured we weren't going to see that. So I think the banks are starting to come back, and things are getting to trend a little bit more towards normal. But
you mentioned a development project there. What's the current state of spec development in the major markets and asset classes?
Well, the one part, in fact, just looking at this stat from Real Capital Analytics, development site down 74%. The general feeling up until this past week or so is new developments are just on hold. And I think that's probably still generally true, unless you've got a tenant, a credit tenant with a long-term lease. Speculative development is going to be, probably going to be paused. We're actually going to launch on this building because we like the metrics, we like the market. Denver has a decent amount of supply coming in, but it's been a very healthy market. It probably has some of the same demographics as Vancouver, frankly. A good young population. We got a lot of in-migration, a good growth rate, highly educated workforce. So the metrics around Denver are very positive. I know what I don't know in Canada, but I know Calgary, as an example, in Canada is not a place where you're going to do spec office development, and maybe not even spec industrial. So it really depends on the market. The major markets, though, that we try to play in are coastal markets, and primarily distribution and development of industrial warehouses. But Miami, New Jersey, Baltimore, on the West Coast, Seattle, Portland. We just sold a building in Portland yesterday that we built, and with good execution. Seattle, Portland, LA, San Diego. So really the port, and down in Houston is another big port market. So that's where the economic drivers are. And I think you will continue to see, none of us are worried about industrial right now. It's really how big and how long will it take for the office market to come back. There are structural changes in retail. We all know it. So retail is a tough asset class. We have a couple loans on some hotels that'll be in workouts because our one hotel that here in Denver, brand new hotel opened, it was at 95%, just killing it. And last month it was at 5%. So right. Those aren't sustainable numbers, of course.
Are there any areas of opportunity emerging that you guys are beginning to discuss around, creative ideas for repurposing where there's change or otherwise?
Yeah, Jason, one of our strategies has been now for several years is, and it's a well overused term, but creative office. So taking older industrial in some cases, close in, connected to amenities and transportation, and repurposing buildings like that are in emerging kind of hip neighborhoods into what we would call creative office. And I think we've had 6 of those projects completed, and 5 of them have cycled, and very strong returns. And I think, even though we all hear about the WeWorks and the co-working business, some of the densities are going to change, but I think that flexibility, the flexible workspace, is not going to go away. And I think you may see more hoteling where we walk into our offices, and maybe not me, but some people, they may not have a real assigned desk, but they can go sit, in a pool of offices and a little less density, but have some amenities around it too. Some more conference rooms, more breakout areas. People want to come back to offices and collaborate. We can collaborate like we're doing today. It's not the same. It's not the same as me walking down to the coffee machine after this call and running into one of my colleagues and having a 2-minute discussion that might be the most important discussion of the day, right? Yeah. So we're bullish on office. I think we're going to try to support it with some research, and it'll be evolving. So stay tuned on that, as NAIOP is NAIOP's contemplating doing an office series on the future of office, utilization, the drivers of productivity with people, the collaborations around it, and systems, operations. So stay tuned on that.
Yeah, unfortunately, up here, I don't know if it's the same for you guys, the media has grabbed onto a few occupiers who have said, this is the death of office, with no data around it or anything like that. It's just say, and we've gone on our own kind of PR push to counter those arguments and provide some data. And it's really too early to say how it could change. But what about within office? Could there be more of a push to that hub and spoke or suburban transit oriented?
Yeah, it's a great question, Jason. And what people are suggesting is, if there is more pressure on office, there will be, and there is. But high-rise office, downtown urban, has really been the best performing sector of office. So CBD, urban office, and the balloon's been kind of off the rose on suburban office over the last 5 years. And I think now there may be a pivot where you've got more of that hub and spoke, where let's offer our employment base opportunities closer to home.
Right.
Still probably transportation links, but and then you got to still have an amenity base around it. I think just the dormant, out in the middle of nowhere suburban office is still a tough putt. Right. But I think this pandemic will lift up some suburban office metrics, undoubtedly.
Interesting. I should mention, if anyone has questions for Larry on market dynamics, just put them in the Q&A, and I can ask those. But maybe we can switch gears now and just talk about NAIOP corporate with Tom. So starting off with, how's the organization adjusted its priorities over the past 12-week period?
Sure, Jason. Thank you. And again, thank you for this opportunity. I appreciate it very much. Look, NAIOP's a trade association. As I said before, we have over 20,000 members. We're in 53 markets, 53 chapters. We have 4 Canadian chapters and 49 US. We have a sister organization in Mexico. So pretty much we have North America covered. And as an organization, we are built for this type of crisis. Why do I say that? Because content and information is king. The very thing that you're doing today, Jason, in terms of disseminating information to the members, what are the trends, what are the issues, that's what NAIOP is built for. Back on March 23rd, we launched our first series of webinars. And I can tell you the topics we were doing back then are very different than the topics we're doing now. Because in 8, 9, 10 weeks, things have changed. What people are interested have changed. So I'm very proud of my staff here in Washington. We've worked very hard, but we've also worked very hard with our chapter executives across the country, across the US and Canada. We meet with them every Tuesday, virtually, of course. And we coordinate things that we're doing. They talk about best practices among the chapters. They talk about how they're pivoting from live events to virtual events. How are they fundraising? Legislative priorities on a city, county, provincial level. So sharing information is really key. And to that extent, NAIOP has been very successful over the years of building a good stable of educational events. And we have these on-demand events, programs running probably about 16 hours in length. You take them in pieces parts. And they were always a fee-driven kind of program. Well, 2 months ago, we decided, if not now, when? And we basically offered them complimentary to our membership, member-only benefit. These courses could be $295 US, as much as $695 US, and now they were complimentary. Well, interesting stat. Typically in this time period when we're selling those programs, we do maybe 100, 150 takers on those programs. We are now over 6,000 people have signed up for those programs. It's incredible. It really is. I mean, you think about it. The timing's perfect. Most people are working from home. They have a little extra time. We saw an uptick in membership for the month of April, and a lot of folks were joining the organization primarily based on the fact that they wanted to take advantage of this free education. It was so successful that we ended up extending that offer through the month of June and July, and it'll expire on August 1st, and we'll take another hard look at that. But the pivot has been very quick, and the pivot has been looking at content, looking at research. Our research department has done a phenomenal job of doing a series. They just sent out their second survey to look at what the issues are for the member, what's going on, who's paying rent. And I apologize, because you know this is live when you got the phone ringing in the background. But you know, we're looking at not only the survey content, but the most important is what's the trend line from survey to survey. So we're in our second survey analyzing that. We'll be doing another one next month. And again, this is information that our members are telling us that they want to know. You know, who's paying rent, who's not, what are the issues they're dealing with. And a lot of it is obviously for some obvious reasons is done on a anonymous basis. We're also looking at, you know, office space demand, what Larry was just talking about. We typically do a forward-looking office space demand. That one's coming out in September, and I suspect it'll tell us a lot where we think this office market's going. We do the same for industrial space demand, which has always been the darling of the industry. And I think that, you know, that demand study will continue with that. Anybody can do a demand study, but we've doing ours for almost 4 years now, and we lay it against actual numbers. And I have to tell you, it's been spot on. It really has. So it's a very, very accurate assessment of where we think the demand for the various spaces will go. And I know you're a little short on time, so I mean, I'll wrap up in saying we're doing a lot on the legislative front. I've been in Washington over 30 years, and you know, it used to be the B word, billions of dollars. Now it's the T word, trillions of dollars. And in any fast-paced environment where legislators are making decisions almost overnight and spending trillions of taxpayer dollars, you really have to be at that table. We as an industry, fortunate, unfortunate, it's a fact of life, is not the industry that a lot of policymakers, you know, have a lot of sympathy for. They think we're a deep-pocketed industry and that we're a source of endless finance. And I say this with all due respect to the policymakers, because they're well-intentioned. I mean, they want to do the right thing, and they have a lot of different groups that are pulling and tearing at them. Everybody wants help. Everybody wants a bailout. And we talked about this in the prep call we did a couple of days ago. A lot of help is going to the tenant. There's not much help going to the landlord.
Right.
Now, I mean, in the industry, we always say a landlord can't do better than his or her tenants. So it's important the tenants stay whole. But then at some point, you have to talk about the landlord and the business that they're running. We're on the fourth tranche of help from the U.S. government. And now and I'm sure everyone's aware that we're in the middle of a presidential election, that's always silly season in Washington. Everything gets politicized. So now we're on the fourth tranche of a support, and the support question is, how much money do we give to the states to support the states? Of course, there are those saying, why do we need to support states that have been mismanaged over the years and have been having huge fiscal concerns? Should the taxpayers of one state be bailing out the taxpayers of another state. So that is really getting a lot of discussion. But quietly, I will say that I think we've been very, very effective in moving legislation to keep the economy ahead. Also, the devil in the details, and the details is always the regulations. So you can have policy and you can have legislation, but it's the regulators, the unelected regulators, that can interpret that policy that makes a huge, profound impact on our industry, especially as it relates to tax code, land use. So everything is in play. All at once, and lots of money being spent, and we're several months away from a presidential election. I'm bored out of my mind.
Well, we have similar legislative issues right now, and I can tell you our government relations committee is busier than they've ever been lobbying government, because all these support programs rolled out, and to your point, in the U.S., it seems like a lot of the owners have been left holding the bag right now. There's relief for the tenants, and there's not really relief on property taxes or mortgage payments that are effective for them right now. So we're really at the table right now on behalf of a lot of our major sponsors and members to advocate on their behalf. One other thing that you mentioned we should look out for that's on your radar right now is a economic impact study for Canada. Can you touch on that?
Yep, absolutely. For probably close to 7 years, our research foundation, the NAIOP Research Foundation, has done an economic impact of commercial real estate on the U.S. And then 4 years ago, we started to do the same study in Canada. And it really looks at what is the jobs generated, what are the revenue generated on a national basis, U.S. or Canada. And it very easily can be drilled down to the provincial or city level in U.S., state, city, county. And what it does is it helps our members, when they're sitting across the table from a policymaker, talk about what our industry means in terms of money generated, jobs, which is very important and is often forgotten. So we are right now, I talked to our research folks this morning, and that study will be taking place for Canada this fall, and we expect to have it very, very early in 2021. But I really do have some concern as we move forward, because most of the states, and I'm sure it's the same at the provincial level, with all the shutdown of the economy and all the revenue that wasn't spent and all the sales taxes that haven't been generated, I think there's going to be a tremendous shortfall. I think these municipalities are going to have a tremendous shortfall. And where do they usually look? Property taxes. So I think as an industry, we have to stay ever vigilant to make sure. I mean, look, I'm not saying that it's a wrong thing to help our municipality succeed, but you never want one industry, you want a level playing field. So you don't want to make sure it's just not our industry that's, toe tagged for supporting these shortfalls that they have. And that happens a lot. But yeah, the whole economic impact study is extremely important. And we'll make sure the second it's done, you all will get a copy of that. But again, I encourage you to look at it. And if you need the data drill down closer to your, let's say, the city of Vancouver, it can be done, and please let us know.
Yeah, and it's interesting what you mentioned there. Our municipalities are struggling. They're worried that not all the property taxes are going to get paid, and they've had so much revenue come from development cost charges.
Right.
They're worried that developments are not going to be moving forward in the current environment, and really wondering where their revenues are going to come from. And now they're looking to federal government support as well. So it's quite the situation that's playing out. So just before we close it out, Tom, could you just point people in the direction of where they can find some of that information that you mentioned?
Well, I would say the best place to go is our website, www.naiop.org. We have a tremendously robust website. We have a COVID-19 page where we have lots of information about our free education, our webinars. We have a whole FAQ on both U.S. and Canadian legislative initiatives. That is really the best source. But again, if there's something that you want and you don't see, feel free to give myself a call. And if I don't have the answer, I will get it for you or put you in touch. And one other thing I wanted to mention also, we understand this is an unprecedented, very difficult time. And, some of our members, as their membership becomes up for renewal, perhaps they've been laid off or they're out of a job. If that's the case, we're willing to give our members a free membership up until such time that they are reemployed or for a year, whichever comes first. Because we really want people to stay engaged. And I have to tell you, the numbers in both April and now the May numbers that closed are very, very encouraging as far as new members. And probably no surprise, we're seeing about 40% of our new members are developing leaders. So these are folks 35 and under, the beginning of their career, and they understand the importance of working together with the industry to figure out how do they get through this maze.
Well, really glad to hear the support you're offering for the free education and for membership for people who are having a hard time. And Larry, appreciate your perspective on what you're seeing in for the macro market perspective in the U.S. and your leadership, and again for flying the Canadian flag literally for us. Thanks to both of you for your time.
You're very welcome, Jason, and chapter members, and appreciate you all participating in NAIOP. And yeah, we'll all get through this. One of the messages that I've been trying to say on these calls is, we've been through this before, but just in life, we're all vulnerable, right? I mean, it just, you're out there. It's like standing on the stage naked, right? You're vulnerable, and that's kind of life. And so, all I would do is just encourage everybody is just have courage around this, right? Just do the right thing every day, step up, get to work. If you're employed by somebody and things are tough, just say to your boss, what can I do to add value? What do you want me to do? I'm in. Put me in, coach. I'm in. And I would just encourage everybody. In my downturns that I've been through, 5 of them, I recited this to one of the other groups, but the first one, my income went to zero. That was in 1981. I'm dating myself. In 1991, we're in a severe recession, and I had to take a big salary cut. Got recovered. In 2001, I owned this company, and I went without a salary for a year because I wanted to make sure everybody else got paid. It happened again in 2008, where we just had to adjust. But don't compromise your ethics, your morals, and your general, good behavior, and it'll work out. I mean, just keep your head down, operate on a high ethical standard, and continue to do business with your other NAIOP members, because that's where a lot of my life's been around this NAIOP organization. I bet we do 70% of our transactions with NAIOP, and just, not even transactions, but architects, and attorneys, and title companies, and this is a big industry and a big system, and utilize the resources that are available to you. Just work on it, collaborate. So anyway, that's my parting message to everybody, and all the best to everybody up in Vancouver.
Thanks a lot. Great closing thoughts. Thank you.
Yeah. And honestly, what Larry says is 100% spot on. This is a great network at any stage of your career, whether you're 25, 45, or 65, NAIOP has a contact for you, and utilize it. I mean, I always say during the good times, people will come to a monthly meeting and they'll exchange their golf scores. During tough times like this, people are talking about deals. They're talking about how to get it done. They're talking about, being creative. So it's a great organization, and I would say use all the resources we have to offer. And thank you for the opportunity. Sincerely appreciate it.
Yeah,
okay,
thank you.
There. Thank you. See ya.
All the best, everybody. Thank you.
Take care.
Yep.
Thanks, everyone. That concludes today's webinar. Thank you for joining us today. Please join us again next Thursday, June 11th, for the next Lunch with NAIOP webinar.